If you're looking for a podcast that packs in sound property advice, as well as offering you an insight into making the world of property effective and ultimately work for you, you're in the right place. Hosted by Arsh Ellahi, the original property rebel. He's written an Amazon bestseller, created the Property Investor app, the UK's first, and is an experienced property mentor. More importantly, he talks the talk and walks the walk.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of The Property Rebel with your host Arsh Ellahi. And today we're going to be discussing a topic which has been doing the rounds for years and years and years within property investors. So we're going to be talking about what's the best way to purchase a property and which mortgage type should you be taking. Should you be looking at the interest only option, or should you be going down the route of taking capital repayment mortgage? And we'll look through the different angles, and I'll also give you my personal opinion as to what I do with my property portfolio. Now, one thing I will say is that everything that I say today is not deemed as financial advice. This is my personal opinion and this is what has worked for me. So if you are thinking about investing, I would seriously suggest that you speak to an IFA, independent financial advisor, or a mortgage broker who can give you the correct advice according to you and your circumstances. So that's the disclaimer out the way. So give you a bit of a background. So I've got quite a few tenants, got pretty much about 1,100 tenants, which is spread just over the best part of 100 odd properties. So I've taken out a few mortgages, and as you can appreciate, I've had to get my head around the different kind of terms and what's going to be best moving forward. And I look at this in two different ways. Cash flow. Cash flow is the stuff that's going to make your business survive. Cash flow is the thing that's going to allow you to go out day in, day out to do other things within property. And then I'm also looking at long term. Do I want to be a slave to the bank? And so, if I was honest, that's probably the way that I dictate which way I'm going to go when I invest. And that's probably one of the ways that I describe interest only versus capital repayment. Don't worry, I'll go into it. I'm going to use live examples as well. I'll have a calculator in the background. So here, if you hear some clicking away, unfortunately, it just means that I'm clicking away on the calculator to try and give you guys the best possible advice. Let's get straight into it. So interest only versus capital repayment. Let's start from the very basics. What is interest only? So if you were to take a mortgage out for a property that you're about to buy and you decide to go down the interest only option, what you're actually doing is that you're only paying the interest on the loan that you've taken. You're not chipping away at any of the capital. So when you purchase a property, let's just say that the purchase price is £100,000 and you've taken out a 75% loan to value or loan to purchase mortgage product, and the bank lends you 75,000. That loan of 75,000 will remain all the way through until you come to redeem the loan. So any payments that you make in between will just be interest payments. So you would not have chipped away at the £75,000 loan. And I'll go through the pros and cons for this as well. One of the benefits of doing that is the fact that payments that you make per month are going to be lower against the capital repayment. And the reason why that is because you're not chipping away at the debt. You're literally paying the interest. So naturally, your payments will be lower. Now, this is great if you're possibly looking to get involved in property or starting in property because you want to generate as much cash flow as property so that you can save that money to start purchasing other properties. The more cash flow you make, the more you'll save, the more you'll be able to reinvest. And hopefully, and I say hopefully, that the money that you reinvest in other properties will generate more cash flow, which would have possibly been more than what you would have if you started to do repayment on the first property. Hopefully I haven't lost you there. It is a bit of a technical subject, so if I do lose you, please feel free to go back, have another listen, but there is logic behind my madness. So let's use that example. Purchase price is £100,000. Now you're going to take a 75,000 mortgage, which is equivalent to 75% of the purchase price. And let's just work on the basis that you've taken the loan on a 25-year term and the interest rate is approximately 5%. Now I've done some brief calculations on this. On an interest only basis, that comes out at £312.50 a month, which is equivalent to, like I said, I've got my calculator in the background, £3,750 a year. Now, if you times that by the 25 years which you're taking the mortgage term on, If you were to keep the property for the whole 25 years, over the 25-year period, you would have paid £93,750 in interest payments alone. Plus, you still have the original £75,000 debt which you took on when you purchased the property. When you calculate all that, so when you calculate the capital payment, the interest payments that you've just made, plus the loan, for that £75,000 loan, or that property in essence would have cost you £168,750. So that's the grand total that you would have paid back, £168,750. That's a lot of money. But however, remember, this is something that over a 25-year period. What would have happened within that 25 years? I'm hoping that the property would have increased in value. I'm hoping it would have made you a lot of money and a lot of cash flow, which has allowed you to go off and start building a property portfolio. You know, previous to, I think it's 2018, you would have been able to offset the interest payments. Unfortunately, with the introduction of Section 24, that is now no longer the case. If you're not sure what Section 24 is, please Google it, or I will cover it in a future podcast. So that's kind of the interest-only model. So I'm hoping that I'll give you a brief intro to it there. Now, the capital repayment model is very much a case of, if you think of the term repayment, you're repaying the loan. You're chipping away at the debt. Now, the way that I see this is that it's pretty much like having a piggy bank. Every month you make a payment and part of that payment goes into the piggy bank. And the reason why I say that, or let's make it even simpler. Just imagine you've got two jam jars right in front of you. Now, when you make a capital repayment, part of that payment will go and pay off some of the interest, because let's face it, the banks want you to pay a bit of interest because that's how they make their money. So part of the payment goes into the interest pot. The other part of it goes into the capital repayment pot, and every month you start to chip away at the debt. Now, I will say that for the first year, you probably won't chip away at any of the debt, because what the bank wants you to do is start to pay off some of the interest first, because obviously that's where they make their money. Now, using the same example, the purchase price is £100,000. If you take a 75% mortgage, which is £75,000, over a term of 25 years at a rate at 5%. The repayments will be £438.44 a month. And if I times that a year, £438.44, if you times that by 12, that gives you a yearly payment of £5,261.28. And if you times that by the 25-year period, it's £131,532. Now, let's compare the two, because yes, the capital repayment is approximately £125 more expensive, but that £125 is also going back into the kitty. So you're reinvesting it back into that property. Now, I'm going to say here that I'm going to give you a bit of a story about my background. And one of the things that I did is back in the year 2000, when I started investing, I heard a lot of people saying, well, let's start with the interest only model. And I thought, yeah, okay, the interest only, I understand the reason why people do it, especially if you're starting out in your journey. Now, the one thing I will say, there's no right or wrong answer when it comes to interest only and repayment, because it is all down to you and your personal circumstances. If you're looking to start out in property, yes, you'll want to generate as much cash flow as possible, and therefore you may not want to go down the capital repayment. Now, I will say that there's no guarantees in property, and I'm a big believer in that. No one has a crystal ball. No one can say that the property values are going to increase. No one's going to say that they're going to decrease. Now, I'm talking in the year 2020, and we're actually in lockdown whilst I record this session. If you were to ask me, would we ever have a world pandemic or COVID or the coronavirus come and kick in 2020, which is going to pretty much wipe off approximately 20% of the value of your property and go into a worldwide recession? No one would ever have said that that was going to happen. But guess what, guys? It's here. Now, the one thing I would say to you is that I'm quite a risk averse person. I can be risky when I want to be, when I'm looking to acquire something and I'm negotiating for something. I can be quite risky. However, when it comes to my long term, I'll go through the two parts in a second, short-term thinking and long-term thinking. When it comes to my long-term, I'm very risk averse. Now, going back to 2000 to 2008, I've seen some good times, which is the boom. I've seen the bad times, which is a bust, and I'm there back to tell the tale. So I actually wrote about this in my book called Boom, Bust and Back Again, available on Amazon. And by the way, that's not a plug. So I started buying properties and I took them on interest only. And what I found is that in 2007, 2008, when the market crashed, is that a lot of the properties that I had were pretty much quite heavily geared. Let's just use an example. I bought a property for £100,000 back in 2004, 2005. When the market crashed in 2007, 2008, these properties were now only worth circa £70,000 to £80,000. However, I still had a loan on it at £75,000. I thought, hang on, now I'm actually in negative equity. And I never want to be in that position where I'm in negative equity. So come 2007 and 2008, I decided to restructure the whole of my business. My whole property portfolio, I put onto capital repayment. And the reason why I did that is that I did not like the fact knowing that the properties were worth they were worth less than I had debt secured against it. So the property was worth 70 and I had a £75,000 mortgage on it. I didn't sleep very well knowing that. Some of you will have properties like that. And if I'm honest, there's nothing wrong with that. It all comes down to personal preference. I could have sat there and thought short term, yes, they're making cash flow. Let's not worry about it now. But I kicked into my long-term thinking. Where do I want to be in 25 years' time? You know, when the mortgage term expires, what do I want to do? Where do I want to be? Do I still want to be able to be in a position in 25 years' time, not knowing what's going to happen in property values? Are they going to increase? Are they going to decrease? And there will be fluctuations. You know, we're going to go through times where we go through some good times, we're going to go through some bad times, and the market fluctuates accordingly. That's part of the financial markets, and that's exactly what happens. So I turned everything onto interest-only mortgage, and admittedly, it costs more money. As per the first example, it costs approximately £125 more per property, based on a £100,000 property at 75% lending. However, I've got the certainty in knowing that every month I'm chipping away at the debt. So come 25 years later, I will be in a position where the whole portfolio is completely debt-free. Now, there are pros and cons to that. One of the massive pros is that I'm no longer the slave to the bank. And I love saying that. Come 25 years, I can say to the bank, here's your money, you lent it me, I've gave it you back. I can do with these properties as I wish. Whilst the bank have a lending over that property, they have a say as to what you can and cannot do with it. And, you know, hopefully you agree with that. Whilst at the end of that, with the capital repayment, I'm chipping away at it. So regardless of what happens in the financial markets, if it increases, believe it or not, I'm better off because I've now got more equity in the property. If the properties take a dip, I'm still quite secure. So as it stands today, 2020, I'm leveraged. I've gone from 75% debt. I'm now actually at around 50% debt. And my aim, believe it or not, I've got a goal that on the 11th of November 2025 at 11:59 p.m, which is approximately 5 years away from where we are, I become completely debt free. So in actual fact, as a result of the capital repayments kicking in 2008, I structured all my loans, so not for 25 years. Back then, I structured it up until 2025 for the 11th of November 2025 at 11:59 p.m. Now, why is that date so important? That date so important is because on the 12th of November 2025 at midnight, I turned 45 years of age. And I didn't want to be in a position where I've seen lots of landlords who are 60, 70, even 80 years old, still got 75% mortgage products on their properties. I was thinking, I don't want to be there. You know, 45 years old, I want to be in a position where everything's completely debt-free, and then I've got that choice what I do with it. Do I give those properties to my daughters so that they can do whatever they want? Hopefully they don't sell them off for watches, handbags and, you know, shoes. However, hopefully that's going to be in a position where they've then got a portfolio where they can decide, are they going to liquidize it, are they going to sell it, and they're going to reinvest it in what they want to do? Because let's face it, no one knows. Property may not be their thing. However, what I've done is that I've provided them with a lifeline. I've provided them with endless opportunities, and they can do what they want, when they want, and wherever they want. And for me, that's the biggest bonus of having capital repayment. There are some tax disadvantages by having a capital repayment, and I should mention this, is the fact that if I was then to hand it over to my daughters, there are lots of inheritance issues. But if you start speaking to a property tax advisor, I would suggest that they start putting you into, it's not a tax scheme, but they start tax planning for you, so that if your plan is to hand your properties over to your children or to members of your family, that they can do that and potentially reduce the level of tax that you're going to pay come that period. Does that kind of make sense so far? So I'm a big advocate for capital repayment, and I know lots of people will listen to this saying, but Arsh, you pay more per month. Yes, but I've got the benefit of being completely, when I say financially free, completely debt free. The guys that have got the interest only mortgages, at the end of their term, they will still owe the same amount of what they've borrowed, and all they've done is paid the interest only mortgage, the interest which was due on that loan. Now, the one thing that I should mention is that with interest only, no one knows what's going to happen with the property prices. And I'll give you an example now. If you're listening to this in 2020, the house that was probably worth £100,000 in 2019 is probably only worth around £80,000 in 2020. Now, if you took a 75% loan on that property that was worth £100,000, you've now got £75,000 debt still secured on that property. And if the property is now only worth £80,000, it means that at best, even if you used to sell it, you're going to break even. In some scenarios, if you've refinanced somewhere along the line, and I'll talk about refinancing in future podcasts, you will see that we've come across so many investors, so many homeowners, so many landlords that are actually in negative equity. When we talk about negative equity, it means that the loan is greater than the property value. So even if you wanted to sell the property, you can't, because you owe more to the bank than the property's worth, which means that you're going to do one or two things. You've got to literally hand the keys back to the bank and say, sorry, this is no longer working for me. But let's face it, they'll still probably chase you for the amount which is due. So let's just say that the house is now worth £80,000 and you've got a debt on it of £80,000. If the mortgage company go off and then have to repossess that property and put it on the open market, if they sell it for £75,000, because there's been a difference between what you borrowed and what they sold it for, they have the right to come and pursue you for that. The alternative option is that if you're still in negative equity, is the fact that you're just going to have to ride it out and potentially change it onto a capital repayment, which, if that's the case, why don't you just do that all those years ago and be in a much better secure position? Now, our bank manager, I've got quite a large commercial facility with Lloyds. Every year he provides us with a breakdown. So last year our debt was X amount of millions. This year it's come down by X amount. So we've chipped away at capital. And then not only that, I've got that equity there ready for a rainy day. So if I see a property that I want to buy and I think, okay, I need to move quickly on this, I can literally pick up the phone to my Lloyds manager and say, Mike, okay, I've seen a property. I've seen a property in this street. I'm looking to buy it. Instead of me taking an additional loan, can we potentially gear up against this property? Now, some of my properties, believe it or not, we've actually paid them off, so there's no debt on them whatsoever. So the Lloyds could actually take a charge on that property, and they could do that very quickly, which means that I could get the funds within the space of 2 to 3 days, as opposed to have to go through the mortgage application and all that kind of stuff. So there are lots of benefits by paying down debt. You're creating equity, you're creating wealth within your portfolio. So hopefully, guys, that's given you something to think about. There's lots more that we could discuss about capital repayment and interest only. You know, there are going to be lots of people that sit in the camp of, no, I'm only interest only because I want to generate as much cash flow from my property. And that's great. But just bear in mind, with property prices, what goes up must also come down, and it will come down. We've seen it over and over again. We've seen it in 2007, 2008. We've now seen it in 2020. No one could predict that this was going to happen in 2020. No one could predict the coronavirus. So no one could predict COVID-19. So you've got to ask yourself the question, okay, this has happened. How many times is it going to happen in your lifetime? Is this going to become a more frequent occurrence? Hopefully it isn't, but I'm just playing devil's advocate here. Whereas I can sit back thinking, okay, even if the properties take a dip slightly, I'm still fine. My gearings are circa around 50%. If it was 100,000, I've now got a loan on it of 50,000. And if the property value has now dropped to, let's say, 80,000 as opposed to 100,000, I'm still covered. I don't need to worry about the bank knocking on my door saying, guys, Arsh, we think your property is in negative equity. We need you to start thinking about it. Something to think about, something really serious to think about. And if you are a property investor, it'd be great to hear your views on this, by the way. Feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to email us at admin@ArshEllahi.com and send us your thoughts. Feel free to connect with us on social media, etc. By searching Arsh Ellahi. And I'm always up for the discussion as what's working for you. And if it's working for you, great. I've got no qualms with that. I'm talking from my personal experience, why capital repayment is the better option for me, for my family, and for my future. As always, guys, if you haven't already done so, please download the Property Investor app. If you're looking for your next property investment deal, the Property Investor app is the only place to go. So we launched the UK's first property investor marketplace in the form of an app. It's called Property Investor. All you've got to do is go to the App Store, type in Property Investor. It's available on iOS, available on Android, and also go to www.propertyinvestorapp.co.uk. As well as that, why not check us out on YouTube by searching Arsh Ellahi. On that note, I wish you all the very best of success. I wish you peace, love, and happiness, and hopefully I will speak to you all very soon. Bye-bye.
The large majority of people make a positive change if they take immediate action. So act now. Download the Property Investor app and join Arsh on his social media channels to excel your property journey.